Order in the court. It's time for Understanding the Law Radio. Well, hi, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Understanding the Law Radio. I'm your host, Peter Lamont, and today we're going to continue one more episode answering your questions that you've asked me over the past year. As I mentioned on the last episode, and if you haven't listened to it, make sure you do, we receive questions all the time from people about the practice of law and you know, how you become a lawyer in law school and things of that nature. And normally we don't talk about that on this podcast. We talk about the law and pop culture and things that are you know, more, let's say, entertaining. But I haven't had an opportunity to really get through questions that people have. And they're good questions. So I figured that this week we were going to do a two-part Q&A. I answered maybe 13 or so questions on Tuesday's episode. So today I want to just hit some of these other questions that I thought were pretty good. And then we'll be back to the regular format for the podcast. But let me know what you think about this. And if you do have questions, send them in. You can submit them through email, through any of our social media channels. All the information is in the podcast description or at utlradio.com. All right, so last week we talked about my decision to become a lawyer and things like that. And not last week, last Tuesday. And I told you I was trying to put these in like a chronological order to make it flow a little bit better. So we'll see where it goes. All right, so this is an absolute great question. And 3, 2, 1. All right, so this is an absolutely great question. And this is a question that, you know, sometimes people ask themselves and realize that they don't have an answer and need to get help. And the question is, how do you handle the stress and demands of being a lawyer? Now, you might be listening to this and saying to yourself, what stress? Lawyers make a ton of money. You know, how hard is it? You go to law school, you learn how to be a lawyer, you come out, you get in with a firm, you make a ton of money, and you know, you're set. Well, it's not like that. It just isn't. So, first off, there are so many lawyers in this country. Like, they could probably fit in their own state. There's so many lawyers. It's an entire state of lawyers. And it is extremely competitive and not what you see on television and not what you hear from your friends and family who are not lawyers about what the profession really is like. So first of all, you don't, for the most part, come out of law school and start making $150,000 a year. Sure, there are people that come out of law school that get into mega firms and maybe they do make $150,000 a year and they work 7 days a week, and that's where they have sold their soul. And I know many colleagues, many friends of mine who attempted that route because they were enticed by the paycheck, only to realize that it was killing them, like literally eating away at them. I have one friend that was older than me, had been practicing probably 10 years maybe before I started practicing. She was really great, a good mentor. I learned a lot from her, and she ended up having a breakdown because the stress was so significant in the career, and she ended up not practicing anymore. So first off, I want to dispel a rumor that coming out of law school, you're going to just step into a job, make a lot of money, and it's not that difficult. You learn what you do in law school. I hear this all the time. Oh, you know what to do. You go to law school. You learn about it. You just come out and you do your job. It's not that simple. I told you on Tuesday's show that when you get out of law school, you pretty much don't know what you're doing because they don't teach you about the practical aspect of being a lawyer. They teach you how to think and theorize and question and deal with strategies of analysis. They don't teach you how you deal with an erratic judge or a very frustrated client or an absolutely, horribly mean adversary or group of adversaries. Like, they don't teach you that. They don't teach you how to deal with having a to-do pile that never ends. You think you're going to complete something, and then before you're done with that and to check it off your box, you've got 10 other things. Or how often you're in the middle of one thing and then 3 or 4 other things pop up at the same time, all requiring attention. So they don't teach you that. So number one, you don't come out of law school knowing everything. Number two, you don't come out of law school, step into a job where you make $150,000 and it's easy. Most lawyers coming out of law school that aren't getting jobs in mega firms, because it's only the top 1%, let's say, that get to these mega firms where you're making a lot of money and working 7 days a week. But, you're coming out and you're getting jobs that don't pay, because smaller firms do not always have the financial resources to sustain multiple employees. It's not an easy thing to do. If you're a solo practitioner, let's say, and it's just you, you likely don't have any money to bring somebody else on board. And then let's say that maybe, you started as a solo and you've developed into a little bit of a more thriving practice. You're going to need somebody to answer the phones. You're going to need somebody to help you with, paralegal work. You're going to need that. And while you might need an associate, maybe you can't afford to bring an associate in. So when you do look for an associate for a small firm, you're not paying somebody $150,000. That's just not how it works. And even some of these mid-sized firms, you might make $50,000, $45,000 at a mid-sized firm as a first-year associate. And maybe that's a lot of money, in your world, $45,000. But when you consider the fact that if you come out of law school with a loan, you could owe upwards of $150,000 to $200,000. And then, if you're working for this mid-sized firm, it's not necessarily a 9-to-5 job. It could be, a 10-hour job. It could be, 11 hours a day. Who knows? So my point is, and I'm not complaining. So don't take this as, oh my God, this entitled lawyer. That's not me at all. And I would hope that over the years through this podcast and through some of the videos and just getting to know me a little bit, that you realize that I'm not like that. But I just want to answer these questions in an honest and straightforward manner, as opposed to just like blowing smoke up your butt and telling you, what you want to hear. That's not how I am in general. So, as I'm looking at these questions and formulating answers, I want to be completely honest. And the honest thing is that when you come out of law school, you're not making a huge salary for the most part. Now, getting back to the question about stress and managing stress, I took a detour there because I got started talking about how they don't prepare you when you come out of law school. Well, they do not prepare you for the stress associated with this profession. They absolutely do not. And there's so much talk about how first responders and police officers and firemen are in need of proper psychological care. And I am 100% behind that, because I couldn't imagine, being a police officer, having to deal with, like, let's say you're a New York City cop and the things that you must see, it must take a tremendous toll on you psychologically. So I am 110% behind the idea that, first responders need to have some available and paid for psychological assistance. Now, while I'm not suggesting that being a lawyer is like being a first responder or a police officer or fireman, It is extremely stressful. And I feel that not enough lawyers have access to psychological help or enough of an understanding to realize that it's not a weakness to seek help when you are at a breaking point. It's really something that they should be teaching you in law school. There should be mandatory classes in law school about management of your day-to-day, your stress, what the profession is like, especially if you're involved in litigation, and give you some tools and some resources to help yourself, or at least to be prepared enough to be able to ask for help from somebody else. So how do I manage this stress? Well, what kind of stress am I talking about? I am talking about deadlines where if you miss a deadline, there's no asking for more time, or there's no saying, I'm really sorry. This isn't like, I'm late for work and there was a traffic jam. And so, I'm sorry I missed the meeting, but let's just put that in the past and move forward. If you as a lawyer blow a date, it could be devastating for you and your client, because there are dates and deadlines where you can't recover from it. If you miss that date, let's say, for example, you've got a complaint you have to file and there's a statute of limitations and you don't file that complaint before the end of the statute of limitations, your client is forever barred from bringing that claim. Now, imagine what a client would say if they hire a lawyer who can't get the complaint filed by the deadline. So these deadlines that we're talking about are very, very strict and severe. In addition to that, you can't just take one case and work on one case. You need, as especially a litigation firm, you need to have multiple cases at the same time. Sometimes when I was on Wall Street, right, and I was working at this super huge firm when I'd come right out of law school, and I'll tell you, I started as a paralegal, and even though that was a super huge mega firm, I think that my first job as a paralegal, I probably made $22,000 a year at a mega firm, and the big bucks went to the corner office partners and the associates and all the paralegals and support staff. Just didn't make anything really. So anyway, getting back to that, these large firms have hundreds, thousands of clients, but they have enough lawyers, they spread it around. But even so, with spreading it around, it's still, no matter what firm you work at, it's still an unbelievably stressful experience. If you're a solo practitioner, it's all on you. If you're a small firm, it's all on you and the other people in your office. If you're a large firm, it's, spread around, but it's still on you as an associate, on you as a paralegal, on you as a partner to bring in the money. There's just no getting away from it. And oftentimes you feel like you just can't come up for air with the stress. You've got clients calling you. You've got adversaries calling you. You've got courts calling you. You've got the need to bring in more work so you can continue to sustain the firm. So as you're trying to do intake, and then you've got the actual legal work, trials, preparation for things like depositions, drafting motions. And again, all these things are on deadlines, and it becomes an extremely, extremely overwhelming, stressful experience in general. So I have skirted the answer to this question long enough. How do I deal with it? Well, I deal with it in multiple ways. Staying organized for me is critical, right? Staying organized, making sure that I have detailed lists, multiple lists, to-do lists, task lists, a calendaring system. Having a case management system, like a digital case management system, has been a critical tool for me as well, because it keeps everything organized and it keeps you on track. So the organization in general is one way that I combat the stress and high pressure of the job. Another way that I do it is through getting into work very early. Most often I try to get into work at 7 o'clock, 6:30, sometimes a little earlier, and to take that time when nobody else is in the office and nobody's calling to continue to organize my day, my week, my month, what the months ahead look like with regard to work, checking through multiple times task lists and things that need attention, shifting things around, being flexible. Oftentimes you'll come in with a plan for a day and then something happens or an emergency pops up with a client. Now you've got to be able to shift. So that pre-work time for me is critical. I also like, when I can, I like to meditate, and I've used for years this headband called Muse, M-U-S-E, and it kind of keeps track of your brainwave signals to tell you what level of relaxation you're at, things like that. And it's a tool. Kind of gives you an idea of how well you're able to stay focused and calm during meditation time. So I like that. Controlling your breathing is another thing. Athletes say it. A lot of motivational speakers, Tony Robbins, they talk about it. But controlling your breathing is another thing that I like to do. Work on breathing habits and staying focused and tying in that breathing with meditation, and of course prayer. Whether you are a religious person or not a religious person, or whatever you believe in, that's whatever it is right for you. But for me, I think prayer is important because I don't feel like in this life you can do it all alone. And I have a great support, team at home. I have a great wife and kids that support me. And I have a great office team that support me, but still I always feel like that higher power is able to give me more help than I could ever give myself. So that's how I deal with the stress. It's very rare that I take days off to decompress. You just don't have that ability. Some years, you don't go on vacation or because you've got a trial or it just doesn't work out. So you've got to find ways on a daily basis to try to control your stress. Otherwise, it ends up eating you from the inside out. And I've seen so many people who can't control that stress and overwhelm in this legal profession turn to drugs or alcohol or other destructive behaviors. And it's really sad to see. But, in one sense, you can, when you're in this profession, you can understand how people get to that point. You can understand the amount of pressure that you feel. So it's obviously, something that is very serious. And I do wish that law school would focus on teaching people how to deal with the stress that's associated with this profession. Sure, there's bar association stuff where, they've got a phone number you can call, but it's like at that point, you're calling the Alcoholics Anonymous number, and you're already in deep. Like, they should give you more training and understanding so that you don't get to that point. But they don't, unfortunately. They don't give you that. And that, to me, that's a sad thing. All right, I had hoped to get through way more than one question, but I kind of tied a bunch of things up in that answer to that one question. I'm going to do one more. We're like 21 minutes into this show, so I don't want to drone on forever. I'm going to do one more question. And this one, we skipped to the end of my list. This one's also a really good question. looking back, what would you have done differently in your career? And, that is a tough question. That's a question everybody asks themselves every day. What if, what would I have done differently? What if I could go back in time and do it again? What would I do differently? And it's very easy to be that Monday morning quarterback and to look back at your life, no matter what you do, and say, if I'd only done this, if I had only, made a right instead of a left, if I've only whatever. But what would I personally have done differently in my career? I think that number one, I would have tried to develop a greater understanding of what the actual practice of law was like before and during law school. Remember, I told you that I did have the benefit of going to school in the night program and working full time and working as a paralegal. So it gave me that insight that a lot of people missed out on. But I think even before that, and even before I went to law school, I wish that I had had the opportunity or the wherewithal to take an internship to see what the practice was like before I even went to law school. I think it would have given me better insight into what the profession was. I think it would have given me some knowledge that would have helped me when I was in law school. So I would have done that differently. And I think the other thing that I would have done, I mentioned it on the last episode, that I would have taken a bar exam course instead of listening to family members and having to study so tremendously hard and stressing myself out, ridiculously. If I had just spent the money and taken the review course, I think it would have been easier for me. Again, I of course passed, but that's not the point. The point was how difficult I made it on myself to study. So that's something that I would have done. And I also think that looking back, I think I would have tried to find areas of the law that were in line with some of my passions or likes. It took me years to start to build out practice areas that involve things that I have a great deal of interest in, whether it's sports or sports-based businesses. If I had sort of tried to mold myself in the beginning of my career down that path, you don't know what the focus of your practice would be at this stage of your life. But I needed a job when I was in law school, and so getting into litigation and insurance defense firms was where I was needed, where there were jobs, and so that's the path. Now, I'm not upset about that at all, because it has given me great insight. Being a litigator sort of sets you apart when you analyze cases, even when we do real estate work, knowing that, I'm a litigation attorney. It helps me see the real estate process from a different angle, a different light, and it can help me protect clients better than if I was, let's say, only a real estate attorney. So I don't regret any of it. And like that funny commercial where the guy gets the tattoo, and I think it's like a Snickers commercial, and the guy tattoos "no regrets." I think that's funny. I have no regrets. I have no regrets. It is what it is, and if I hadn't traveled down the road I did, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have such a great family, and who knows where I would have been. So very easy to look back and Monday morning quarterback, but I typically don't like to do that. I don't think it helps at all, but it was a good question. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Sorry I only got through, a handful of questions, but hopefully it gives you more insight into me, into the legal profession. I actually really enjoyed doing the 2 episodes of the Q&A. So if this is something that you like to hear, let me know, and maybe we'll do it again in the future. We'll be back to our regular programming types next week. And until then, make sure that you share the podcast with your family and friends. Tell them about it and subscribe if you haven't done so already. That's going to do it. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Understanding the Law Radio. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. We're available anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, including Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. Also, don't forget to check us out online on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks again. See you next time.